recording. And yes, so welcome everybody to our show and tell part 8, place part 2. So today we'll be hearing from Roger, Julia, Lisa, Graham, David, Sarah. And I would like to hand over to, I think last time, because Julia so kindly offered to go last and I squeezed in before her. So I'm gonna ask Julia maybe to go first today.
Okay, that's good. I can get it out of the way. Like I say, him indoors has told me I've got to do it in like 10 minutes or whatever. Right, presentation time again, because this is, I find, the easiest way. Right, I've called it In at the Deep End, although the deep wasn't in Hull when I first came, obviously. Right, I've heard it said that Hull has... Oh, I haven't shared it. Right, what have I not done?
I shared it.
Oh, where's that?
Near the bottom.
Oh,
No,
right.
not there.
Oh,
Go back.
go back. Go back to it. Where's show then? God, what would I do without my technician? Here we go again. Share screen. That's it. I think. Am I sharing it?
Yeah, should be.
Yep.
Right, okay. In at the deep end. Roger, I can't make it go up because it won't move.
Yeah, we'll move it over a little bit. It's at the side, you slide it.
Well, where do I move it? Oh, all right. That'll do. Right, in at the deep end then. I've heard it said Hull has an elastic on anyone who visits here, pulling them back, and this certainly was the case for me. My first bout with Hull was when I came here as a 17-year-old for an interview for the Art College, and Peter Hammond, the then principal, nicknamed the Reverend because of his preaching to students, spoke to me about my portfolio. He told me I was very young and should go and explore the world or be an au pair in Bulgaria and then apply to the college down south. This advice, which I obviously ignored, was an improvement on that received from St Martin's, which I've mentioned before, read female students making suitable wives for male artists, etc. So it was not very encouraging. But when I was accepted at Hull, I went for it because things were very bad at home, as my mother had just discovered I was on the pill and I wanted to break up with my current boyfriend. I wasn't sure how to do that. This photo taken in the pub in Nuneaton, where I did my pre-degree foundation course, right? And I was in the pub and I was lying about my age because I was only actually 17. And obviously was waffling on about things I knew nothing about, like the tax system. Right, I really had not noticed all the bomb damage in Hull at this time, simply its proximity to the sea. As coming from the Midlands, being near the sea was my raison d'etre apart from going to London. Unfortunately, my application to St Ives had been rejected, and North Sea or not, it was still the sea, and independence beckoned in the form of art, sex and drugs and rock and roll, or so I thought. Hull looked a great option, and it turned out to be the turning point in my life. My fellow students were from literally everywhere, one end of the country to another. Roger didn't turn up till the following year. That's my other half, for any of you who don't realise that. When I was in my second year, even though he is older than me. The pattern for making friends who were not from Hull was already in place. And it was not till my return to Hull many years later, after living in London and the Lake District, that I began to know people who were actually born and bred in Hull. Here are the motley crew of art students in front of the main art college where I was interviewed, which is now Northern Theatre, I believe, if there's anything going on there at all at the moment. When I came back to Hull via a year doing my art teaching certificate in Leeds, I found myself, instead of teaching like Roger, who was back in Hull already, working at Tiffany's nightclub as their resident artist. I would design and make scenery for the front windows and inside the club and around set themes: Halloween, good old days, rock and roll, decorating the bars with everything from USA's good old Uncle Sam to whatever was required, including publicity in the papers. All this ground to a halt after a couple of years when they introduced generic kits for the clubs and replaced handmade work. I have literally looked everywhere, as has Roger, for the photos of Lexington Avenue with all my work in situ. So having failed to find them, you'll have to put up with this generic, yet again generic, photo from the Hull Daily Mail. And there is Lexington Avenue for any of you who remember it. However, not unlike the travelling library that I worked on in London and Kendal, it afforded me the opportunity to meet the locals. I suppose I thought of myself as rather bohemian amongst these unfamiliar people. As it turned out, on all occasions, I subsequently discovered I was considered that nice girl with her partner Roger, while managers, staff and all kinds were having wild affairs with one another, as I found out later. Towards the end of working for the nightclub, I became pregnant with our first child. I cannot find the pictures of me with my bump in my dungarees painting in the workshop, or all the photos I took there. I'm repeating myself, but I confess I loved it. I also sometimes worked at night in the cloakrooms for extra money, and that was an eye-opener. Art students paled into insignificance. And there's the grandparents, Roger's parents and mine. I did not really have a problem with Hull until I had children and they went to school. And when I eventually began teaching, I admit I considered the schools very rough and alternated from feeling sorry for a great many of the children and the poverty in which they were growing up to feeling outright fury at the sheer unpleasantness some of them were capable of towards one another, my children and their teachers. I do think my children developed a thick hide, but it was with deep sadness one day on an escalator in town with my then teenage daughter. I witnessed her having vile abuse hurled at her, and her reaction was, "Don't worry about it, Mum, it's an everyday occurrence, I'm used to it." The boys did not fare any better, possibly worse, but in the end they all found friends, often again not from Hull originally. However, they began to thrive in all kinds of school activities in and out of school. These ranged from sport, dance, theatre, music and science, and our eldest case, bands, and everything in between. Hull did provide them with a lot of chances, this has to be said, with a lot of interesting clubs, friends and travel opportunities. It saddens me in regard to them having to look outside Hull for friends who were, like them, immigrants here. We taught them not to be elitist or prejudiced, or so we thought. But I do sometimes think perhaps this explains why 3 out of the 4 all flew south. And in all honesty, we encouraged them to apply to universities far and wide. And even our youngest went to Westminster University, although he returned to Hull later and did an MA in media. I certainly think there is a strange love-hate relationship with Hull amongst my family, and we bear some responsibility for this. Our daughter still holds that being tired of London is being tired of life. Not sure that's holding true in the current crisis, but she did return to Hull to work at Hull University for 3 years, bringing her Londoner boyfriend with her. He is giving a talk with the Feral Art School this Monday about his work. I think he really liked it here, but surviving financially was a challenge. They are still friends, but parted ways because I think Chloe felt his art got prioritised over hers, but don't quote me on that. It was wonderful for a time they were here, but it was London that had an elastic on Chloe, not Hull. And there they are. And that's Lee, who will be doing a talk on Monday. I think it's 5:30, Feral Art School. Right, and this is Owen. Our youngest Owen, selected by a visiting Sikh to play Maharaja at school in a traditional play he had devised. He experienced quite a bit of bullying at times, but he did have friends who were from Hull, more than any of his siblings. An attempt at social engineering by the council meant he was allocated William G for his senior school. After the then head at his primary school said if you can't get him in anywhere else, find a way to send him to private school. This went against our principles, but it is what we did. I do not regret it. History repeating itself as my parents did the same for me when they feared I was more interested in bad boys than my education. I have often felt like an outsider, as has Owen in Hull. Getting an education was not always a priority for many people, and I suspect it's still true. Getting a job is what counts, and Hull's maritime history inferred most working class boys would go to sea. So what was the point? I like to think this has changed for the young men, for the young men in Hull, and they can aspire to whatever they want. But we are all kept in our place by government decisions now as ever. This painting was derived from one of my many trips to London to see exhibitions with family and friends. It's situated on the steps from Somerset House, and some of you may recognise Dave Bales is in there. There he is in the middle. For me, things changed again when I became very ill, and post young children, working as a teacher, I rediscovered art in a big way. I returned to Hull Art College for a second time in my 50s and met some truly great people. This time around, the students were mostly from Hull, although not the tutors who were nearer my age. I started to perceive myself as old, probably for the first time, but being with young people gave me a new enthusiasm, and there were also some mature students with whom I bonded. Some, like me, had returned to art after having children or never having explored art before. By now, I was back to making work quite prolifically and became truly engaged in the Hull art scene, exhibiting at any venue I could find. I became far more aware of Hull's maritime history, which linked with my love of the sea. Paintings have emerged that are to do with where I live. The last few years have become very productive for both me and Roger, and being part of CAG and hosting the exhibition of the female gaze, the City of Culture, certainly filled any empty nest syndrome we were experiencing. We travelled to London regularly to see exhibitions with family and friends, and then suddenly, last March, it all came to an end. However, in lockdown, we've come to know all of you and talk about our experiences, so all is not lost. I've come to realise my heart now lies in Hull, most of the time, but only when I am not missing my children and grandchildren. I've used my painting of my youngest son, Owen, in France on a beach, as it depicts him becoming an adult, reading the paper dated 11/9/2001, the Twin Towers, read the Twin Towers, but looking on as children play. I think I called it Lost Childhood, but I suppose it was me registering my early years of mothering were reaching an end. And there he is on a beach in France. Ta-da, finished.
Thank you. It was lovely.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, sorry if I was a bit rude about Hull, but you know.
No, you haven't. That painting, I've never seen that painting, Julia. That's lovely. I like that.
I think Owen's got it in his house. I gave it to him.
Oh, right. I love it. Yeah, really nice. Yeah.
I've got
Don't
to
forget to click.
stop sharing. I'm trying to find it. Where the hell's it gone? Oh, there it is. Stop share. Whee!
Oh, excellent. Thank you very much, Julia. And that was excellent. And not as negative as I expected it to be after your hesitance last week. So yes, any comments and thoughts on Julia's piece about place and how she presented place through the eyes of your children a lot as well, isn't it? And how your personal experience and that pull of the big city, London versus Hull, and how welcome you were made in Hull. I thought that was really interesting, isn't it? Is how welcome we feel in a place and the ambiguity behind all of that. So yeah, thank you for sharing.
I think Julia, what I like about what you've done is you've kind of documented your life really, you know, in picture format, haven't you? You've made pictures that kind of, you know, summarise your development and you kind of all the things that have happened to you throughout life through pictures really. And that's a really interesting, you know, kind of narrative that you've created, you know, visually. I thought that was really good. Especially like that last painting that just came. I thought it was really, really
Yeah.
strong painting. So yeah,
Oh,
that's great.
Also, can I just say that the way that you're doing your presentations and the writing and the text, it's almost like I've just sort of thought about them all together. It's almost like you're writing an autobiography or something, you know, around your artwork and your family. And you know, I mean, there's probably quite a lot of texts and images, and kind of, it's almost like a kind of book. It's really interesting.
I tend to ramble, so I find it easier to do it this way because I've done Women of Words now, which is another marvellous thing I haven't really talked about with Michelle D and a lot of people, which was at the first Wednesday of every month, and we did it online today, but it was really interesting because it was about women's stories in Hull, and that's how I've got to know a lot of new people in Hull. Through this Women of Words thing, which are poets and all sorts. But I do it like this. I read it, you know, I just read it because I can't trust myself not to.
Just a really quick follow-up. Julia, which is kind of interesting important to all of us, I think. Really, did you document your life and your kind of development before this lockdown period in the way that you do now? The way you reflect on it, document it, and you make imagery about it. Was you doing that all the way through?
Horrifically, I've written diaries most of my life, some of which re-emerged when we were clearing the attic out, and I started reading things and I thought, who is this person? But there you go. That's how you change, isn't it? You change. Although I don't feel any different. I still feel like that 17-year-old turning up in Hull.
Good. Good. I'm glad you do.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. That was great, especially because you know, the Humber Street exhibition. That was a highlight. One of the highlights, definitely, in 2017.
Oh, thank you.
It really was. I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah, well, without Chloe, I'd never have managed the forms, I'm telling you.
You know, I actually did catch. I caught this afternoon as well, which was great. Just to say, with Michelle D.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, because I had a little nudge
Yeah,
about 2 o'clock. I think.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I'm really cross I missed that again this afternoon. It always seems to work because I do Women of Words as well, and I always forget when it's on. And also, obviously, a lot of Julia and Maya's life has been quite we are different, but we live in parallel quite a lot because we're both Southerners and we both came to Hull as immigrants, as she puts it, and so I've obviously followed her life because I've been a friend of hers for 40 years. So I really do feel that business of the pull and the push of the love and the hate about Hull, because however long you live here, you never feel you're from Hull. And it's really, really pisses me off when people turn their heads and they look at me as if I'm some sort of alien, you know. And I've lived here for, well, the whole 45, 6 years or something. And I know that it's in my bones now. I knew that when City of Culture happened. It really, really affected me. Despite all the controversy and all my mixed feelings and, you know, the legacy and all the rest of it and all the confusion we've all got about what happened there, that year, I felt so proud of it and so wanting it to succeed and so wanting it to be something for the world in a way, to get recognised and to finally get its, you know, place on the map, which we did get in the weather. You know, I think it really surprised me how much I became really attuned to Hull. I wanted to find out so much more. It also coincided for me with the fact that I had stopped paid work as a, you know, teacher person. So therefore, it filled that gap fantastically that year. But I do understand so much of what Julie's saying, because I also had children born here, so they're Hullies. You know, I'm not, because I know I'm not born and bred in Hull. And also, like her, I have a husband who also isn't Hull born. But you know, if anybody disses Hull when I'm away from it, my God, they get my lip. They really do get my lip. I absolutely will not have people, you know, take it down when they've never been here most of the time, of course, you know. So it was really lovely to hear that again, just to relive those moments. Because I remember Julia Wright painting that stuff in Lexington Avenue and Romeo and Juliet, whatever it was called originally. You know, and we all used to go down. We weren't actually those mass nightclub goers. We used to go to Silhouette, didn't we? And down, you know, down to the Welly. I didn't even know if the Welly was there then, but the Polar Bear was the place everybody went to, wasn't it? If you were relatively alternatively art school and sort of not wanting to go disco, which of course I love now, but you know, it's a very, there's an incredible life that we've lived here, and it's in my bones even now, you know. I know it is. I've lived here more than I've ever lived anywhere.
Excellent. Okay, and in the spirit of keeping to time and giving everybody...
Sorry, I went on a bit there. Sorry.
No, that's brilliant. It's excellent, and it fits really well with everything, and this is the point, isn't it, that everybody can comment. So great. Thank you, Julia. And I love seeing all those pictures of you guys as young couple, and that picture of you in the newspaper. Brilliant.
So do I.
You know,
So do I. As long as
glamorous,
I
you know,
don't look in the mirror.
glamorous couple. So I've just written a little list, kind of, I'm going to alternate between male, female. So I'm just picking next. Graham, please, if you don't mind sharing your story about Place. That's okay. And
Yeah,
I
that's good.
spotlight you.
I'll only be about 10 minutes. I'll try and rush through in about 10 minutes. I've chosen 40, sounds crazy, but I've chosen 4 places. One I'm going to return to at the end. So I'm going to start off with the place I was born, really, which was Goole, which is where I live now. But the place I'm sat now, I think I mentioned before that I was born right across the road, about 40 metres from here. So in my whole lifetime, I've travelled very short.
Stubbs has just written, does anyone know a general builder who can do fencing and a bit of plumbing?
So,
my travel from start to now is very short, but I've been on quite a long journey in between. So I'm just going to, explain. I'll come back to Goole at the end. When we joined, right on the motorway, when we joined the M62, we can go left or right. We can go west to Yorkshire or east to Hull. we always gravitated as kids towards Hull. There was something about it which was a bit more, it was like a bigger version of Goole, really. Another port, but on a much bigger scale, had better shops, better shopping for parents. So they always dragged us along. I started gravitating towards the gallery, Ferrans. And Ferrans was
I can't hear.
No.
Is that it? Did you miss it all?
Oh no.
Just
The Ferrans.
a little bit.
You got to the Ferrans.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was saying, I started going there as a kid, looking at pictures, seeing the world of art. So that was my, real initial education, in world art. And I spent a lot of time studying pictures. I probably spent more time in that gallery than any other gallery, in the country. I also exhibited there. I was selected for them of a show, a number of shows there. So it's very dear to my heart in a way. It's Ferrans, I'm a very big supporter of it. I also went to college there, and I met people at college who influenced my career, still influence me now, like Martin Chalk, people like that who turned me on to abstraction, and the things he taught me have stayed with me all the way through. I still think about them now, still trying to get my head round up to his level, really, of thinking. And I met Bill Beach there, I met Emma there, his daughter. We've all grown together and stayed in touch. We, worked together collaboratively over that period. So Hull was always a very special place. It was also a place where I did a lot of antique dealing in my early years, I mentioned before. At that time, Hull had about 25, 30 antique dealers. So we just went from one to another, trying to make a little bit of money by buying and selling something you just bought. It was a really nice find. So for lots of reasons, Hull was always my go-to place. We always, rather than Leeds, we always turned east to Hull. It had a gravity, also like some people have mentioned about spiders, I was fully involved in that, the music scene. And used to love, going to those places, watching bands there. It just seemed a bit more contemporary, more tuned in somehow, turned on. So that's Hull. I also worked for the police there. I did all my police work in Hull. So everything about it was, very important to my development. Then I went on to Birmingham, which is where I really grew up and really you know, experimented in many different ways and kind of tasted life, you know, the, you know, more interesting end, I guess, you know. And I loved everything about that. You know, I loved met brilliant people there. Some of them who've stayed friends and associates. Certainly all the students have, a couple of tutors as well. So I love that. The other place, which I guess, if I was to, it's difficult to identify what it is about it in a very simple term. The place, it's not actually a place, but it's a happening that occurs all around the country, which is, it's a field, usually a field, it's an antique fair, often around this area or sometimes in London, but the same setup just moves around the country. So it's like 500,000 vans all opening up together. So it's an antique fair, an open air antique fair, where you get 1,000 vans unloading stock all at once. And the beauty of that for me is that I never ever feel more alive than when I'm there, because I'm using all my skills of, you know, being able to tell. It's like, it's where acquired knowledge is king. And so anybody who's got an acquired knowledge over a long period of time will be, I guess, you know, reasonably successful there. You'd have to be unlucky not to find things, you know, if you go in there with a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience. So I feel most alive there because I know I'm using all the skills I've developed over my career as an artist and as an antique dealer or whatever. But that's the place where it all happens for me, is on those fields, in those race courses, around those things. But it's the same group of people, all doing house clearances, going to auction, collecting stuff. Some maybe not realising anything about, don't know anything about modern art, but yet get buying these things, selling them at a fraction of what they're worth. There's such a buzz to that. You're not ripping anybody off. You just, you know, just using your knowledge, really. You know, it's just the way it works. I undersell things. I don't know everything. And so I undersell things. But it's a great community spirit. I've got a great group of people who work with me, and you know, we've just got a really good, positive vibe going there. We're all friends, you know, about maybe 200 of us, but all very close friends, and working at, it's just great. I love everything about it. And I feel so switched on there, like a drug in a way. I'm going to come back to Goole now, poetically and symbolically. Because when I've been to London, I've been to any antique fair, I've been to any exhibition in London, wherever I'm going, there's something about Goole which is brilliant, that it's so flat. And with it being so flat, you can see all the buildings on the horizon, you can see all the main, you know, the architecture, which stands out. Slightly obscured now by all the windmills, which are brilliant, but it's not quite as defined. So you've got a church, a couple of buildings, a couple of cranes from the docks, but there's two towers, which we call the Salt and Pepper Pot, which you're probably familiar with. You know, there's a pepper pot, which is quite phallic looking, a thin, slender, phallic looking thing. Then there's a concrete industrial building, which is, we call the Salt Pot, built in 1926. And they're the images that I've put online as a forerunner to this talk, an introduction to it really. And that to me, when I used to travel back on the motorway, it's very flat plain land, I could see the Salt Tower. You can see it when you come back from Hull, from about 7, 8 miles away. You can see it come back on from Thorn, Doncaster. You can see it, you know, in the distance. And it's always like a beacon or like a lighthouse, almost guiding you back. In those last 8 miles, I've got one eye on the road, one eye on the tower. I'm just aiming back like a target almost to get home. And the reason it's so important is that when you've been, you know, it's just something about that feeling of returning home, return to familiarity, which I think is what we all kind of value. We've mentioned it already about the sense of place and the sense of returning home. But I've got a target to aim for, a centre. I had a studio, in fact, returning to it after the lockdown, at the base of that tower. And that is a special thing, you know, because, you know, it's just a shit building really, but I just love the idea it's there. So when I come back and think, I'm aiming for that studio, I'm aiming for that place. It's an old abattoir at the bottom. I've got a room there. And so it's just a great feeling. You know, I love everything about, I love that thing about moving back towards a target. I think I made a piece of work some years ago now, which was based on a slice really of, if you imagine a cross section of the tower, it's just a slice of that, but it's done out of a dartboard. But if you took a slice, it's the same composition, and that's called a concrete target. And it is about unassailable aspirations, but it's also about my travel back through history, through time, back to this place that I know so well. Everybody knows me. I know probably most of the 20,000 people that are here. You know, so it's just a very familiar place to be. We're all very close, knit community. That's kind of it. But there was one little thing to it which made it extra special for me, was that I was in Tate Modern about 3 years ago now, and I was walked into a gallery of mixed show photography. I walked round a corner and was confronted by this image by Bernd and Hilla Becker. Just that, on the wall, about 5 foot by 3 foot. And that is my studio here. This is the cross section of the dartboard, the concrete tower. That's the tower I aim for. And it was there. I know Bernd and Hilla Becker, they do, you know, the two photographs of industrial buildings, you know, they're brilliant. Brilliant photographers, just in a very, you know, very, without any perspective in it, just a very plain photograph that's quite a moving thing really, called basic forms. So that's the word, you know, they're just superb photographs that they make. But to see Gould, when I had no idea, I photographed this tower probably 1,000 times, and I made all different kinds of work about it because it was so special to me. But for me to be in London and to walk up the steps, go up the escalator, arrive in a gallery and see that, I was coming home into Tate Modern. Does that make sense? Which sounds crazy. But what a buzz that was. I couldn't believe it. I thought it was my, when I first, I thought, oh, it's my work. I believed it was my own work. It belongs to me, that, in a way. It's my studio there. And so I just couldn't get my head around it. And I thought, I just couldn't believe it. They'd been and done that in secret. Although I knew they did that. But they'd gone and took these photographs. It was brilliant. And they'd been drawn to that tower in the same way I have all my life. So that's it really. So it's just a roundabout way of starting out in a place and coming back to it in a very kind of, you know, kind of unusual journey, you know, psychological and physical journey. That's it really.
Why?
Thank you. Thank you.
Great.
Ray.
Why?
That's amazing.
Serendipity.
Graham,
From-
did you actually say it out loud to someone in the tape? I think I would have had to have said to someone.
Jot it down.
well, no, I thought it, and I couldn't believe it really.
Yeah.
But then, again, to make it even more unbelievable, I thought I've got to get the book. And when I looked at the books online, it was on the front cover of the book, which was just crazy. It was a crazy thing.
With your
So,
Is that in Goal then, that building?
yeah, you can't miss it. When you're driving past over the flyover.
Have you still got the studio?
Well, not at the moment. I had to take everything, because due to COVID, we take everything out vacated. I'm going back there.
Absolutely wonderful. I envy you, your attachment to the place that you came from, because I loathe the place I come from. That's why Hull means so much to me, because I'm a Midlander.
The thing is, Julie, you know, it's not just the, you know, I live fairly comfortably. You know, I've got my family here. You know, my mum's still alive. She lives here, just half a mile away. My kids both live here. My grandkids live here. So my whole family's within, you know, 2 mile radius. So there's no way I would ever want to live anywhere else, really. You know, it just feels right.
Well, maybe I've got what I deserve. My children have gone away the same way I did, but they've gone away.
That's been fortunate. It's been fortunate.
I suppose she was crying or laughing.
As well. Anybody else, any other questions at all? Or?
Yeah, I really loved when you said that you feel fully alive when you're in that business of the antiques.
Yeah,
and
that's right, yeah.
I really, really, really love that, because I quite relate to that, because I think the more you know as an artist, or as you've been trained and all your life experience, and if you love decades and you understand decades, I say that lightly, it's amazing to me how many people don't see that's a 30s thing, or that's a 40s thing, or that's a 50s thing, in whatever capacity it is. It's because we've had a very specific sort of way of looking at the world, haven't we? We sort of connect it all up, and none of it separate from anything else. And I really, really get that feeling when I go through massive vintage fairs or anything because I love them and I'm missing them so much at the minute. I realise how much I do them. I really get that feeling. I just get a completely ridiculous buzz when I see something that I think, oh God, you know, I think I commented on your lovely space lamp or whatever you put out. I think it was on Lockdown Lives, Still Lives. You know, I would immediately recognise that as a whatever it is, not specifically maybe, you know, it's maker or whatever. But I think working in many different arts as I have, like we all run different things, I do connect those things up. And so I recognise a set that's a 1930s inspired or a 1950s inspired. And sometimes you forget when you've been at art school, that's what it does for you. You have that innate knowledge, which even if you may not have possibly done many options in it or focused on it forever, it is in you. It's incredible what it does for you, isn't it?
I think there's so many people, Caroline, that spend their life, you know, looking deeply into a subject. Certainly many, I mean, they're obsessed with taxonomy, obsessed with, you know, get all these crazes and, you know, get involved in all this mad shit, really learn every little detail about it. And so people gather knowledge all the way through their lives obsessively. Yet never really find an outlet for it. You know, they don't really find a way to use it.
Yeah.
Like I know, you know, everything I know about, I just kind of try to use it. So it's maximum.
So true.
Whether it's art, whether it's making things, or whether it's, but antiques is something that's kind of connected, but in a way different because it is a knowledge-based pursuit.
It is.
You've got to do it, and it's not all happens in the middle of the night, really. You know, when you see it on TV, everybody's packing up and going home. It's like middle of the afternoon. Everything happens in the middle of the night when it's still dark. We're all with torches. That's how we do it.
You see, for example, when you're creating theatre work or anything set-wise, you may need some context. You need to have that knowledge of, you know, there's no point if it's set somewhere, a specific context, getting the wrong, you know, it's really fascinating to me. That's what I've always loved when I used to teach theatre and drama, that I would always give them a set.
My internet connection is unstable.
Oh dear.
Are you online? Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
So I'm saying I just love the fact that I had all those connections in my head. I knew I had that innately, whereas many people who worked in the theatre world that I worked with didn't have that because they hadn't had the drama art training, you know. So it's interesting.
I noticed there was a loophole in the fact that antique dealers are at all the auctions. They know nothing about modern art.
Yeah.
They're all buying stuff, and things do slip through a lot in London, especially. Things are slipping through those auctions like mad, you know. And so I just found it a very natural. It was kind of easy for me to be walking around those places, cherry picking artwork from antiques.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I've done, you know, all my life really. And so that, but it's just a loophole.
How big is your house, Graham? Because we have this problem that we can't stop finding things. I think most art people have clutter.
Yeah.
Immense
6 bedrooms here.
And I've trying to sort it has become impossible because my children will not want it.
I have 6 bedrooms.
But weirdly, you just reminded me of my eldest son. I used to try and send things to jumble sales, and he would come with me, and we would come back with more than
he's creative then.
Because while I was serving on a stall or something for some good cause, I would turn around and find the other huge cardboard box.
There is a law that says no matter how much space you have, you will fill it. You will make use of it. And I think that's like I think William Morris said, you know, don't have anything in your house which is either useful nor not useful or
beautiful
or useful. That's right, yeah. And so he said that. Well, the modern, you know,
it got some ugly things as well.
He was a very wealthy guy, able to do that. But I have to have a lot of things that are beautiful and not that useful, but things I have to sell. So it's a thing where it's slightly different perception. But whatever space you have, you will fill it. We have 6 bedrooms here, 3 are studios, and two are bedrooms. That's it. You know.
Okay, thank you so much, Graham. It's really nice that you picked a place that's kind of not a real place as such, but that travels. So the antique fair, so it's kind of like more of a concept, isn't it, and a place that kind of moves around. So I think that's nice. It's a sense of belonging, isn't it, that you find when you're there. So
right, Graham's high up places as well. Coming into, sorry, Marianne, when you come into Hull and you see the Humber Bridge, it's high up, like you were saying about your buildings that are high up, and even HRI, which you don't have an attachment to, because it towers over you. Once you arrive, you feel home.
Yeah,
I really liked that.
Exactly.
I wanted to ask you, Graham, whether you'd ever lived high up, like when you were in Birmingham. Were you in flats looking down, or have you always looked up?
I don't think I have. I don't think I have.
Ah, that's your next task then, to live
Mm.
high up, so you've got a
Yeah.
brilliant view down.
Yeah, I've just got used to being short, really. Low level.
Whereabouts did you live in Birmingham? Were you in the centre?
Right, thank you anyway. Thank you, everybody. So that's it.
I've got a note here.
Oh, yep.
Sasha, who's in Doncaster, her dad helped build the Humber Bridge.
No. No.
Yeah. Go, Sasha.
Yeah, I did. Hi. Oh, hang on, I'll put my video back on now. I just told that to Mike today, funnily enough.
What did he do?
Well, actually, I haven't listened carefully enough, have I? But it worked on it for quite a long time, and it worked on the really tall cranes.
Wow.
Building. Perhaps I should ask him a bit more about it. Worked on that when he was really young. He often refers to it.
Wow, it's incredible.
I probably saw him working on it because I'm
Yeah,
that
me
old.
too.
I
used to go and watch it.
I'm that old. I used to go over on the ferry, as did Roger and everybody else. We used to go on the ferry before the bridge.
Oh, lovely.
We used to be able to see it out of the top window of the house that I lived in, but you had to kind of stand on a box.
I
to
can see
see
the
it being
lights
built.
I can see the lights from my top room, from my bedroom. The lights at the top. Excellent. So I thought I'm just going to say about the audience, if that's okay with you. So I thought Lisa, Roger, Sarah, and David. Is that okay? And then if Mike and Sasha and Arnie want to say something as well, would you like to also talk about plays today, or are you happy to just listen?
I'm happy to listen, if that's okay. I'm enjoying listening to your stories.
Great.
I'm finding it really interesting to hear about people who are really connected to the place they've lived, or where you live. And it's just kind of raises questions for me that have been at the back of my mind for a long time about the place that I live and, you know, my connection to it or disconnection to it, actually. Funnily enough, Mike here has come to Doncaster, and we've got to know each other over the last year or so, probably more in the last year. And Mike knows a lot more about Donny than I do. This kind of like makes me feel a little bit, this is not right, you know. And so there's questions for me. I'm finding this really interesting. But no, I have just spoke a little bit then, wasted some of your time. But that's
great.
all I wanted to say just then.
No, it's really nice, those little interludes, and I think it's a bit of a shame we always have so much to say, all of us, but we always run out of time. It's terrible. But yeah, so I hate having to kind of police time, and it doesn't feel right.
One interjection.
Yeah. Sorry?
May I make one interjection?
Absolutely, please do, Mike.
I think there is a meaningful conversation which is emerging around placemaking. Because obviously there is this kind of adopted position, especially by the Arts Council right now, about placemaking being very high up the agenda for funding criteria within the new 10-year strategy.
Yeah, there is.
But of course, placemaking also sits quite neatly within some of the language used by property developers. And I don't know, we could start unpicking that a bit, maybe.
Whoa, that's another 3 hours.
Maybe another day.
Mine's about that. My thing's kind of about that.
Go on then.
Well, like no, because that'd be messing with the fleur. Because Marianne's got a schedule, haven't you?
Yeah, but it was just randomly picked in a way. So I'll happily, you know, why don't you go next, Sarah, if you're ready, and then.
Is that all right, Lisa?
Yeah, absolutely fine. Yeah, no worries.
Okay, it does fit in with that.
Okay, great.
Right, I'm being brave and doing a presentation as well, so bear with me because this is out of my comfort zone.
I'll spotlight you.
So I'm going to do a share screen.
Yeah.
I'll
find you.
Hang about. Do I have to close? Oh,
You don't, you just kind of pick the right screen when you know, share screen, you've got all your screens coming up. Perfect. Yep, you've done it.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and then I have to start from the first slide. Okay. So this one's about public spaces and creative communities. A word I really like, emotional geography, which describes the way that you feel about a place, or the way people feel about places, and their connection to places. So my question when I was thinking about this is, can art change our energy and in turn change a space's energy, and can we observe this? And the value to our health, the space's health, and the balancing act between artists and property developers. And then there's a little bit at the end about a thing that I do called Urban Picnic, which is a much more pure and beautiful kind of artist's take on this and this question. A lot of you have probably seen this place. It's the underpass at the South Bank, and it's just an example basically of like a haven that was created by a subculture within a city environment. And they wanted to build on it and turn it into shops and an extension to an existing cultural venue, which is the National Theatre, I think. And the community actually fought back, and there was a lot of people were involved and put a really good argument forward about the value of shared space and public space and the asset that the South Bank is to public cultural life, so and how this was cultural, and it is still a skate space now. This is a good film. That's also the flip side of it, where it's people that are living in, again, like it's London, so it's not a typical example because London is very congested, but it's people watching as artists move in, because like you say, the property developers see the artists as like the goose that laid the golden egg, and the residents and the artists themselves end up being pushed out when the property developers come in. So that's kind of some context or some thoughts about a place and how it can change. And then flipping to like the other end of the spectrum, this is a project that we do which is much more innocent and lovely. So this is like the polar end of it. So it's deep breath. A project that we're doing is Urban Picnic Hull, and this next event, we are literally going to meet up at a tree and make poems and read our poems out, and that's it. But the idea being, like, for me, as the person that's organising it, I'll be observing the space around the tree. We're going to go in, it's littered at the moment, so we'll go in and we'll tidy it up, we'll get rid of the litter, and we will be kind of making it ours. It's got this amazing vista, it's high up, it's at Paul, which is kind of over towards BP and just a bit beyond, and it's special. And then this is another one that we did, Urban Picnic, which was in a woodland with an orchard. We picked apples, it was during Brexit, people felt hopeless, so basically it was like, to take a different perspective, we went for this walk from Hull and felt very abundant, and then we created works out of leaves, and it was very sort of just a nice thing to do, but it was also kind of an observing space. There's some photographs of it. This is one that we did down at Lord Line. We took a walk along the Transpennine Trail and created some artwork together. So we were allowed to meet in groups of 10 then. And we left little exhibitions that were kind of ephemeral exhibitions, basically just temporary exhibitions up against the wall. And then we tweeted about it and shared it online, so that people could find these little artworks that were kind of guerrilla artworks, really. And it was something for people to do whilst they were on their socially distanced walks. But the weird thing was there was a boat that was moored up that was called, it had a name that was relevant to lockdown. And then this little bit of graffiti was on the wall that said quarantine as we walked down. And that's it really. So I'm dubbing this tree the Poet's Tree. So yeah.
Sarah.
See what happens with that.
Sarah.
Yeah. Yes.
Hello, Sarah. I was going to say, I just hope you give the tree a really good hug, man.
Yeah. We'll
Got to
do.
be hugging those trees because that's really important. But that is beautiful. What's going on there? Really love that. Fantastic.
Yeah. That's great, Sarah. Really good.
I think that's about 10 minutes.
Well, the thing is, it does describe that thing about making something your own. In the way that the South Bank skate park was just taken by the public, really. It was like a piece of, people going about the Colston thing about whether it was the right thing to do to smash it, to kind of paint it, take it down. Of course, it was the right thing to do. We all know that was the right thing to do. Totally inappropriate, and that was the appropriate thing to do. With that was take that concrete underpass and for the kids to take ownership of that space was absolutely fantastic, and that should be preserved. I mean, it did. What was interesting about it was that it was going to be turned into shops, boutiques, just like the rest of that side of the river. So I mean, they did actually have to concede, multi-millions of pounds worth of real estate, but they realised, thankfully, that it was the right decision to maintain that skate park.
Absolutely.
Now. So that was such an important thing that happened right in the centre of London.
Absolutely.
Hearing all the sound of all these sort of roller skates and the boards, it's a fantastic experience when you walk under there. You just know you're going there. You think, oh, is that bit I've got to walk through? I love that bit. It's like having
That's clever. That's the clever thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I love it.
It's finding a way to be clever enough to claim a space that they can't take back from you. Yeah. That you can, and it's not that easy. I mean, that area has become, iconic. It's become what you expect to see. And if there were suddenly boutiques and things there, people would be bloody furious. But I felt that Humber Street has started to go the same way since CAG left. And I don't want to be mean, but it's hard.
Can I just add, as regards to South Bank, because I'm an old skater, so I was skating from 78 to late 90s, and I was really part of that crowd, that whole thing. So the whole petitioning of it, I was there, and but the interesting thing with that is going back to Graham earlier and your beacon, that tower. I've got that same tower in Bristol. And beneath that tower, we created what we called the Magic Circle, which was it was under the flyover. So it was our realm, our domain, and we built ramps. Enough, we just claimed it.
Barney, do you remember when I met you, I gave you a magazine?
Yes, Sarah, I was just going to try and get it. In fact, because when Graham was trying, I was going, hang on, it's here, so I'll be back. Continue. I thought that straight off.
Schwarzenegger said.
Sarah, I just wanted to say as well, thank you so much. Obviously, I kind of know about the urban picnic, and I was there, and it was a very, very special day. And when you're doing it next time, I know you've invited some people from this group along. It's definitely worth coming. But I've never seen you kind of articulate it in that way. What you've actually had on that first slide, I find incredibly moving and touching, and to kind of observe, how people can change a place and whether the energy changes when you actually do something nice and positive in that space. So I really love kind of what you've put on that first slide, and to kind of really examine that a little bit further, I think is so interesting, because it's something I really relate to, how a place kind of resonates back onto your well-being, but kind of vice versa, isn't it? How you can change a place. And we probably all experienced it when we move into a new house, and it just doesn't feel right yet. You really still feel kind of the previous owner's energy and their presence, but then over time it becomes so you that everybody who steps into that space kind of just senses. So I think it's really nice to kind of apply that to public spaces. It's brilliant, and kind of I think it goes back to what happened at the South Bank, and I love the South Bank and I love that element there, but it's become such a powerful owning of that space that nobody could take that away again. It's really, really interesting. I love Yeah, and the idea
Can I
of
just
go
can I
around and
just
just claim those spaces. Yeah, really good. Thank you.
can I reflect on what Sarah was saying, which was lovely, Sarah, thank you, but also joining it up with what Mike was saying earlier. So like placemaking. So when people have talked about place, like this evening and last week, you could see how important places are for who we are, for like our identity. So the identity of a place and the identity of an individual person, they're kind of intertwined. So I think like that's really deep connection. But like Mike brought up about placemaking, placemaking can also be the most superficial thing in the world. Like, I don't know, how do we sell this place, and creating some identity, not because it's at the centre of us, but because it's something that needs to be sold, or sold to outside businesses or tourism or whatever. So I've always found myself a bit split with placemaking. Like, I think it's the most important thing in some ways, or like a really deep thing, but also it can be a very superficial thing.
It can be very easily abused, can't it? That's
yeah, yeah.
Very just there's like literally both sides to it.
Yeah.
And
I think
easy to
as
find.
well, a really important thing to consider really is the fact that place can be fixed or it can be itinerant. You know,
Yeah.
so in a way that at my place was an antique field,
Yeah.
full of vans and antiques. That can be anywhere in the country. And the same way what Sarah's saying, you know, about the skate park at the South Bank. Me and Lisa, when we started going to London fairly early on as a group, you know, to see the Kersler shows, when we was working in the prison, and we used to pass by that, and I knew it, like Barney, I was a skateboarder, and we used to walk past the South Bank and say, you know, that's what our studio should look like, really. And so we nicked a bit of that, and we use that aesthetic for our inside the prison. And so that shows how that place, it had a ripple effect. Not just me, loads of people, there'll be loads of people doing that, you know, seeing that and thinking, actually, the impact it's had here, let's us take a bit of that and make use of it. And so we did it almost copycat form, really. We made an immersive environment that looks exactly like that underpass, you know, that part of London.
That's how we go sit there. We were there at the opening of the new, accidentally opening of the underpass this time round, and my son's a skateboarder, so we literally went to London to go skateboarding.
Yes,
that was
But
that's why we were there.
That's a great thing.
Brilliant.
Power to the people. That militant action is it's fantastic, really. You know what was achieved there was just such a heartwarming thing, and gives us all a little bit of inspiration and kind of energy to keep doing this kind of stuff. It was brilliant, you know.
Did anyone watch the? Sorry,
Mike was going to say.
Okay, so what I was going to say is that we're not talking about time. We're talking about place. But of course, in terms of consensus and how we imagine a place together, that can take place in a nanosecond. And that shared imagination within a moment is as good as it gets.
That's what the tree's about, exactly that. That's the whole thing of being together and creating something together in any location, and the tree is the purest example of where you can create something together. You become kind of uplifted by the experience of creating work together, and then you become attached to that place because that's where it happened. So it's to sort of do that and then see how people feel about. It's just to see how people feel about that space afterwards, because we're going to clean it up as well. When we get there, it's quite littered at the moment. So by starting at the point where it's quite littered, and it's been littered over years because it's a vantage point, we're cleaning it up and putting something back in as well. So that sort of feels like it's the right thing to do.
I wish I could have been there.
We haven't done it yet, this one.
Yeah,
the tree one.
Next time. If I'm allowed.
Yeah, it's happening.
It's
happening in April.
Yeah, okay. It also resonates strongly with what the three presenters spoke about in terms of you know, deep engagement with the place through childbirth or parenting, or returning to a place and reviewing somewhere under different weather conditions or different emotional feelings. But I strongly believe too that in terms of philosophically, that you can also walk away from any instant with just as much meaning.
Do you mean that if, say, for example,
too much value sometimes in the durability and permanence of anything?
Could it be, for example, a fantastic novel that's got a brilliant bit of description and a wonderful moment where I've just read an amazing book which creates this unbelievable world, and I have lived in this world now. I can't get rid of this world. It's still in my head. It's still with me. It's a place to me. It's quite amazing. I've been spreading it to everybody, you know. But sometimes the words can do it. I mean, we're talking here because we're not actually in a real place, are we? It's not real to me. It is real, but it isn't real.
We are completely in a place, and we're in the same time.
We're hearing and seeing something, but it's not the same.
There is that existentialist thing, though, where you can be in a body, or you can be in a mind. You know, that can be the place. In your place, it can be in your mind.
You know, I think there's very little difference.
It depends how far away you want to really. We're talking about topographical things, really, but in actual fact, a lot of people, their world is in the mind. You know, and that's a difficult place to sometimes escape from. And it can be in your body. You know, there's lots of different kind of places that we all inhabit.
Infinite, isn't it?
About the whole spectrum.
It is.
Just to connect with Sarah's project again, I was just reading something today about how walking as art connects your mind and your body with the world. So Sarah's, like, I know we both like walking as art, don't we?
Yeah.
Those three things coincide at that time.
I've been doing really thinking about that, really thinking about how when you're walking, you're putting the you can, if you think about it, stop thinking and feel. So if you focus on the feeling whilst you're walking, it's possible to
Excellent. Oh my God,
sorry, I'm carrying on too long.
No, it's brilliant. I feel like we could go on about this topic specifically for quite some time. So maybe we'll revisit, you know, if there's an element of this conversation that we could just revisit for another talk, it would be lovely, because I think maybe it's placemaking next time or something like that. So, you know, after this talk, you know, please feel free to kind of put your suggestions forward for another conversation if there's something.
Well, if many of us go on Sarah's piece, if many people go on to Sarah's project, that would be nice to talk about afterwards, maybe.
Yeah, I'm just kind of a way of moving on, and we have Roger next, if that's okay.
Yeah, be okay.
Go, Roger. Wow. What's this, Ed? It's only Roger's thing. Really. About place tonight.
I've recently calculated that I've spent 69% of my life in the city of Hull, and a staggering 92% of my adult years. So far, whenever I'm aware of it or not, the place will inevitably have had a profound influence on me. Although I'm yet to acquire the famous Hull bolshiness, or an accent in which Paul is pronounced Pearl. I've had two periods of living in the city, September 1970 to June 1973. And from September 1975 to the present day. It's the first period I want to talk about. This could very easily turn into a catalogue of the wild and bizarre events which everyone's time at art college inevitably produces, but I'm going to try to keep them to a minimum. My arrival in Hull presented me with a newfound freedom. I was, for the first time, a proper long way away from my parents and my past, and I could reboot my life into a form that I felt become me. Once, of course, I could free myself from the shackles of the Regional College of Art's approved lodgings, where no callers and definitely no visitors were the rule of the day. Apart from the challenges of independence, Hull in the 1970s did come as a shock to my system. South Wales had bounced back from the war, and industry there was booming. And so the deprivation I encountered on arrival was definitely something new. Although back then, the poverty was something of a godsend to hard-up students who were an altogether different breed to what they are now. Invited to eat with a fellow student, I was initially surprised to be offered my food in a biscuit tin, whilst he ate his out of his one and only second-hand saucepan. When in Rome. By the time my second year on the DPAD course, I felt that I definitely had a handle on student life. I, along with 4 others from my year, were living on the ground floor of a once grand house in Colton Street. The rent was 10 shillings a week, that is 50p. As the only female of the group occupied the room adjoining and cutting off access to the kitchen, a lot of our cooking was carried out on a Berlin electric fire, laid on its back.
They said.
Believe it or not, this was more than adequate for our needs, as most of our fine dining took place al fresco, or at Dot's Cafe, which was across the road from the now demolished Fine Art Annex. Needless to say, there was no refectory in Craven Street. Dot's had its own special ambience, catering exclusively for art students and dock workers. This should have been a fairly explosive mixture, but surprisingly, everyone rubbed along quite well together. I suspect the dockers appreciated that our presence was integral to the cafe's survival, so we were reluctantly tolerated. Dot herself had an extra insurance policy. Anyone hanging around in the cafe as midday neared was told in no uncertain terms, "You students better clear off now, because the men are coming for their dinners." We knew our place. Dot, her husband, and large Alsatian dog lived above the cafe, with a staircase descending directly into the dining area, which, depending on where you sat, could result in a shower of dog hair floating down towards your plate whenever Timbo made one of his frequent trips to and from the family living quarters. Yum. On reflection, the strange thing about my first 3 years in Hull was how totally isolated I and probably most of my fellow students were from the city. We were almost all outsiders, with students from as far away as Australia and the United States in my particular year. We would walk the 6-mile round trip to college every day. We didn't have a television or radio and certainly didn't buy newspapers. We frequented a student pub, that is, the long-gone cafe bar and the Polar Bear, and attended exclusively student parties. We were students in the town of Artland and existed blissfully unaware of Hull's history, traditions, and to a large extent its people, all of which surrounded us. Yet, yes, there were drugs about, but the strongest one was art. We became lotus eaters, living in a narcissistic world where we and our artist lifestyles were all we really cared about. My student time in the city was positioned exactly between 2 trawling disasters, which rocked the community. The loss of the St. Romanus, the Kingston Peridot, and Ross Cleveland in 1968, and the Gaul in 1974. The terrifying thing is that I suspect that had these events happened a couple of years later or earlier, respectively, I'm quite confident that I would have been totally oblivious to them in my student bubble. So that really was my first Hull experience. I often walk past the approved lodgings and wistfully glance up at my old attic room. I wonder to myself, what would I have thought back then if I were to be told that 50 years later I would be a grandfather living in the very same street? Nevertheless, it was a wild and strange and wonderful 3 years, like an extended trip to one of the less popular areas of Westworld, where it was possible to play at being a real artist, for a while at least. That's it.
Oh, most wonderful, Roger.
Great.
Artland. Artland, I love it.
Never quite look at electric fire the same again.
That cafe looked great.
Strange that you've written about about students who were like proper students, as it were, because I've just written a short story about stuff today, and I was talking about our lives in the port in Surrey Docks in London when we were students, just a few years before we came up to Hull after you, and that's what I think. You know, you think of what students were like when we were students, and obviously the general different standard of living, etc., that is expected. And good, you know. Now, when you think about it, we were absolutely destitute, weren't we, all of us? It was fascinating. I always find that fascinating. You know? There you go. Fascinating. That's great, Roger.
Thank you. Right, move on.
It was great. Talk about it a bit.
That was brilliant.
I can tell you things about it that you don't want to know.
Well,
I loved that photograph in the cafe. It really reminded me of being a student, because you co-inhabit worlds that are completely detached from your own world, and you find it sits really comfortably.
It looks
It's
a lot
like
bigger than that
working man's
photograph.
clubs become student hangouts, don't they? Really comfortably.
I watch quite a lot of all sorts of international students walking around Union Avenue, and I often wonder what the hell they're making of it, you know? Because it's Union Avenue is what it is, you know, a real mixed bag of everything, isn't it? And you see, and you hear all these multitudinous accents and worlds all colliding down Union Avenue. You think, what can they make of, you know, of Hull, as it were? It's just, but much like we did, you know, but they're even more sort of taken away, aren't they, really? It's incredible.
Well, I can tell you, I loved it when I came here. And it's funny that you actually mentioned that kind of, you know, the poverty of students, because when I came to Hull in '93, it still felt very much like that. You know, students had no money, everybody was poor, and I love that whole sense of, you know, making do with things and being inventive, and just kind of so much creativity in that kind of, not necessarily poverty, but you made do with things. And it was great.
Everybody had nothing, so everybody was the same.
Yeah.
The amount of sculptures
weren't they?
in Dot's Cafe. The amount of sculptures made in Dot's Cafe out of cigarette packets. Silver foil. We used to sit there making stuff until she kicked you out when the workmen
Where
came.
was it? Where was Dot's Cafe?
Craven Street.
Craven Street.
Craven Street.
They pulled a school down that it's
Holderness
all
Road.
gone. It's all gone.
Holderness Road, right?
Just before the bridge in Holderness Road, the railway bridge.
Blanken Street's still there. That had a part of the art college, didn't it?
I think that austerity. I think the austerity we all experienced was part of, you know, it was a life skill we all picked up, really, you know, through going through that process. It was useful education in many ways. But I think to be just to congratulate you two, really. I mean, you've got one of the best sets of photographs of that period. You know, you could be David Essex, you could be, you know, you just look so cool from that period. I think, I think you should do a show.
Poor.
No, cool.
I know.
Yeah, and poor. It's
I think you
hard
should do
to
a show.
when you're poor.
Isn't it? I think
you should do a show of your photographs from that period. I think that would be a really coa thing to do.
I used to draw in Dot's Cafe. I actually exhibited them in the CAG gallery of, I used to go in all the cafes, and you could only sit in there with a half a pint for, you know, which was all you could afford. So I would draw, and I've got drawings of the polar bear, and they're all drawings of that era. And
I think you should collate those and make them into some kind of exhibition.
You're amazing documenters of your lives, you two. You're amazing.
Yeah. Absolutely, definitely.
It all
Thank you,
came
Roger. I think it's really nice as well to kind of, you know, when we talk about plays, because it's sometimes, and as actually Mike mentioned, it's sometimes a time period as well, isn't it? That becomes a place.
It's very specific.
Place in our head, isn't it? These student days are a place that you kind of visit, and it's very nice. Great photographs, absolutely. I like the one in Bridlington as well. I kind of noticed all you 4 students, but you saw all the ladies in the background, you know, like proper old, you know, with their proper clothes and their big hair, and kind of that contrast, you know, it's really nice. Excellent. Great, thank you. And I think I've got Lisa next, if that's okay.
Hey, yep. Right, I've got to be honest, I found this really, really difficult. I've lived in lots of different places, and I lived on a farm in West Yorkshire for the first 12 years of my life, which was, when I think back, that was probably, well, lots of people do think their childhood was really happy, but I do feel that I was out in the open all the time, and sort of just sort of in the middle of nowhere, and it was just out of interest, it was 2 fields over from the Yorkshire Sculpture Park. So we used to walk up, it's called Bow Hill Farm where I was brought up, and we used to walk up over to the Yorkshire Sculpture Park, and that when it was West Breton College, and Breton Hall College, sorry. And I'm digressing now. There's just thought I'd show you a picture, which is just of me and my brother in the field. And that was just, we were, you know, I just always think about being outdoors and just being really kind of, you know, not caring what we were wearing, and just getting really scruffy and sort of, you know, really just within like the barn buildings, and sort of, you know, they were like really happy sort of times. But anyway, when I first thought of place, this roll of paper is what I wanted to show you originally, and then I went off the idea, and then I digressed to loads of different things. I lived in Sheffield, my grandma and granddad were from Sheffield. My mum and dad were both born in Sheffield, so we went back to Sheffield a lot when I was younger, and then I ended up doing a degree there. And this roll of paper was made during the first performance that I did on my degree in Sheffield, and it was in 1991, so it was exactly 30 years ago. And I've thought a lot about this piece of work, and it was called Stitching Time, and it's the performance. I've got a picture. I got it from a slide, so it's not very kind of good quality. And what it's from is when I first got to Sheffield, they ran a trip called Creative Aid for Romania, and it was a group of students. There was 3 universities involved, so there was Sheffield Hallam University, and Wolverhampton and Brighton. And they, funnily enough, Bill Beach, actually, who Graham mentioned before, I didn't realise, but we only found this out a couple of years ago. This was his creation, was Creative Aid for Romania. He thought up the idea and joined these universities together. And so what it was is we went twice a year, and it ran for about 3 or 4 years. But I went on one of the first trips in 1991. And it was a group, so we had 3 minibuses that travelled, so we travelled by land to Romania, and we started off at Sheffield, and then we picked up at Wolverhampton, and then we ended up at Brighton, and then drove to Romania. It took 5 days to drive there. It was 10 hours a day, crammed into the back of this tiny little minibus driving. And we were all sat there amongst sleeping bags, pots of paint, because we got sponsored by Dulux, so we took loads of paint over there. And what we did is we lived in and worked in Romanian orphanages and psychiatric hospitals. We went to a TB, tuberculosis hospital. We went all over Romania to these different places. So we lived in with the people in the orphanage or hospital, and then we painted murals on the walls of the orphanage or hospital. And so we got like the little kids we took loads of pictures for them to choose their own like cartoon characters, what they wanted around their walls. And they were really horrendous. It was in such a state at that time. Romania, everything was all a bit messed up. There was no food hardly. There was like, I went, and so we stayed for about a month, but I was about 19, and it was the most traumatic but wonderful sort of experience of my life. And when I came back home, we saw such horrendous things happen in these orphanages, and there was a lot of aid for Romania, that like the Blue Peter aid and everything that was taken out there. And it didn't really get to the orphans and where it needed to go, and we saw that firsthand. We saw a big massive lorry come over carrying brand new white Nike trainers to hand to the it was a girls' school, the physically handicapped girls' school that we lived in for about 3 weeks to do the paintings. So the lorry came in, and they brought these trainers in, and the lorry driver was instructed to photograph some of the girls wearing the trainers. So they got them, the directors of the place got the trainers out, and they photographed. So the girls like put these trainers on and were holding these white trainers, these brand new trainers. And they photographed it all, and then the man went away, and we watched it all happen. They waved the lorry out of the hospital, where we were staying, and then as soon as the lorry went, the director said, "Right, ordered all these trainers, give them back, take them back off the girls, put them back in the boxes," and they were just taken away. They were just then sold, for money. There were nothing, a lot of the orphanages we went to, they had a special room in the orphan each, and that had like a glass window, and there was like jigsaws that were brand new, and they were with like a painting scene on, and they were actually hung on the wall with the plastic still on the jigsaw, and everything was positioned like a display, of all these amazing toys, these Western toys, and none of the orphans were allowed to go and play with any of the toys. So we said to the directors, "Well, what's going on? Why can't these kids play with this?" And their answer was, "Oh no, that they're far too good for the children. They will break them. They'll mess them up. They're not allowed in there. They're not allowed in that room. It's locked." So they could look through the window. They couldn't go and touch the toys, and it was like, what? So anyway, I came back home. I was only really young, it had a massive, the food shortage. At one point we went in September, everything was pickled. You couldn't get any fresh anything. Everything was in jars. It was all kind of, there was no, you had to wait like in a massive queue for some bread that had like grit in it. It's like, we ate like with the orphans in the orphanage, and we got like soup with, like I got a whole foot actually in my soup once. It was a whole chicken foot, which was like floating around in it, which was quite an experience. But we it was like food. It was just like a really traumatic thing. Anyway, I came home, and I made this performance, and it was called Stitching Time. And this roll of paper is all the notes, all the little things that I wrote down during the trip. And then so there's all sorts of just things that some of the girls had written, and like stories and all sorts of things. So I literally laid them all out, and the duration of the performance was 10 hours, because that's the 10 hours that we sat in the van going. It was trying to make sense of it, really. And I stitched them all together. So it took 12 hours to stitch the whole of the of everything together. And I stitched some of the, it was almost like that mending thing, you know, when you're mending and you're trying to stitch something up, you're trying to make sense of it, or you're trying to mend it, or trying to, you know, I was really kind of quite traumatized by all these experiences. I went home to my mum's house, and the food was full of cupboards, and I was really like, why have you got all this food? And, you know, I couldn't I thought, it was like, they haven't got any food and you've got all this food, and like, why have, you know, it's just, everything was quite, it was hard to get through it. Anyway, the reason why I'm talking about this is because I thought a lot about this during the pandemic, and I realised that another really big sort of experience in my life is this pandemic, and my way of sort of coping and trying to make sense of it was me doing all these collages that I've been doing. I'm now on to 59, and I'm on to 59 in the extended series, but I've done 19 of the first series. So I've got about 21 to do to make it up to 100 collages, which is what I'm trying to do by the end of the pandemic, if, you know, but maybe it might go on further. But it's my sort of way of, for my own mental health, of trying to sort of do something that's repetitious over time. But it's kind of like, when I start feeling a little bit out of sorts and I'm not quite sure how to handle things, then I make some artwork, and those collages have really kept me sort of leveled me out. Every time I felt a bit rocky, I thought, right, get the magazine, start sort of making something. And they kind of, because I've been looking at social media, seeing what other people are experiencing in the pandemic, and then I've been sort of thinking about, well, I've used a lot of that within the collages as just a way of visualizing what is going on, because it is really such a strange time that we're living through, and that was it, really.
Great! Wow.
You're brilliant. You're brilliant.
Brilliant.
Brilliant, Lise.
Yorkshire Sculpture Park.
Amazing.
Yes, please.
I love your the time wrap. You know, the white. You know what it reminded me of? It's for me. Obviously, it's a long time ago. You've had lots of feedback since, I'm sure. But that's the first time I've seen it, of course, and we have. It reminded me of being forensic, almost like a forensic scientist. It was like there was quite a skeleton sort of bone quality about it.
Yeah.
Where you were trying to, you know, pick it away, to sort of find out the truth. Because when you were talking about it, you were really sharing it in such a bemused and completely, you couldn't, you know, obviously you were even younger then as well, so it's like, I can imagine it must have been absolutely amazing. And that was the time of Ceausescu, was it? It was before he was deposed.
Just after.
Yeah.
2 years.
Wow.
2 years.
After. Yeah.
Just after.
Time to go. Wow.
It was amazing. Do you know, we went to Bucharest to see the palace, and that was the most incredible experience, because you walk down this amazing road, and everything looked really, really incredible from the inside. And a lot of the buildings, they'd kind of like, it was like so elaborate and over the top, but a lot of the buildings, they'd kind of ran out of money, so they were held up with sort of like not scaffolding, but like all held up. But as long as Ceausescu could see everything looking amazing, he didn't care that behind it was all just a mess. He was literally unbelievable, that guy, and his wife, of course. They were both
quite
Yeah.
desperate. Unbelievable. Wow.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
I
Marvelous
think-
piece of work. Amazing.
Yeah, I love Lisa. I thought
Lisa,
it was really- sorry.
you've obviously we've talked about this many times over our friendship, really, and I never heard it quite presented like that before. I thought it was very moving, actually. And, I've not seen a scroll before. I know Bill, he did come up with that idea. It was his project, and he's offered you the archive of the whole. And I think it's more important than ever now that you take that archive on.
Yeah.
Because the way you presented that was just brilliant. You know, I'm so proud of you, really. I mean, that was just fantastic to see. And I just think you are the one that needs to take that forward, because it did remind me on that early photograph, you look very much like a very young Tracy Emin, sat in the field, you know, where you're very scattered around bits and pieces of ephemera that join together to make something very special. I think you are definitely need to take that on as a project now from Bill and make something of it, because that is a very moving and very great testament to humanity, really.
It is. It really was. It was
well done. That was brilliant. That was brilliant.
fantastic.
Yeah,
I'd like to see them. I'd definitely like to see the artwork now after that.
Yeah, me too. I'd really like to see that, if there's any way of being able to see it.
Yeah, definitely. Fantastic.
I find, Lisa, with your work, like when you were talking about the roll of paper, like what you do is so, I don't know if it's metaphorical, symbolic, I don't know quite what the word is, but sewing to repair and stitch together your impressions. And when I see your collages on, like, because you share them on Facebook and stuff, I've seen all these ones, and I see you disappearing and appearing in the sort of female form in these different settings. And I think I've always found that kind of, you're present and you're absent and you don't know if you're there or you're not, and it hovers. I find that fascinating about the collages, but it has such I can't even think of the right word, such a concrete, real message parallel. And then now I've seen the stitching and the repairing and the, I don't know, the cobbling it togetherness of that experience.
Have to see
and
all
your
those
parallel, it's so powerful, Lisa.
Yeah. Can you imagine a wall of those collages, the whole 69 or whatever you said you had already? That would be just quite stunning to see that massive wall. It's wonderful.
All of the work's very empathic, isn't it? It's all combat the weapons that were useless, and and this as well. They've both got that really strong empathic thing that sits. So they all sit together.
I think the way I interpret them really is the way that the land, you know, the environment invades the body. In the same way the virus invades the body. So I think, I mean, I don't know if I'm right in suggesting that, but Lisa will be able to tell us. But I think, for me, that's what is powerful about those collages, is the fact that it's the landscape, the environment, the things around us becoming invading into ourselves, our bodies.
It's all the same line. All the work I've seen you've shown, Lisa, it's all the same line. What you're interested in. It's really fantastic.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah,
very,
Lisa,
very
and
moving.
just to echo what everybody's just said, I think first of all, I think how you presented that, it was incredibly moving. You know, I felt, you know, and as you said, it must have been quite a traumatic experience for you to kind of experience that and see that, and how you kind of came back and kind of worked through that by stitching all those things together and spending the time and kind of using the time to heal. I think is incredible, and it's all for you to talk how you use your current collages to kind of make sense of what is going on. And I think that kind of comes back to the concept of the artist, you know, as a like the socially engaged art, or kind of the social sculpture, you know, kind of everything around us kind of feeds into what we experience and what we output, and that kind of dialogue between the experience and the artwork. And I think you do exemplify that really well. And I think what Jill just said, that being there, not being there, that what Sarah said, that empathetic, I think there's something really very rich about, and it's really great to hear that, you might have the archive, you know, from that whole experience. So thank you very, very much. And I think it's kind of, we're really building up a whole picture about what place means, actually. I think it's, you know, there's place, there's identity, there's time, but there's also kind of healing and mending and kind of almost looking at the place and what we can do to make a place better as well, and how we contribute to that as an artist. So yeah, I think it's again another really rich kind of conversation has happened. And now it's, you know, it's David. It's over to you, David. And I hope we're all okay for time. I know, I'm sorry, Roger, we haven't managed to stick to the time, but I think we're doing okay. Yeah. So bear with us, and over to you, David.
Okay, right then.
Be about another 10 minutes then. About another 10 minutes then.
Oh, God. Okay, sorry, I've got a screen up here and I can't sort of like move it, so I've got to get to oh God, sorry about this.
You go to slideshow?
Yeah, I'm trying, but unfortunately I've got a screen over the top of that.
Oh,
I can't get onto it. I don't know, I can move this.
Can't you go down the side?
So I've got the screen. Okay, slideshow. Okay. Can everybody see that well enough?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is, I was struggling for a title to this little presentation because I didn't quite know what was required. But then I came up with I Know a Place, which is rather relevant, really, and pertinent to what we were talking about. So I'm rather pleased about that. I was going to say that I suppose daydreaming is one way of beating lockdown. Thinking of somewhere else you would rather be than where you are. Whenever in the past I felt constrained, stressed out, or simply bored, I tended to think of a place, a particular place, and that's Malham Cove. And this sort of brings me kind of like some kind of sanity, I suppose. I haven't actually been to Malham, which is up in West Yorkshire, for more than 40 years, and I don't have any pictures of it. Also, I keep a picture of it in my mind instead, I suppose. It's up there in the West Riding of Yorkshire. I think I first visited Malham Cove because I lived in Leeds, of course. I first visited Malham Cove when I was in junior school. Ascension Day was always a holiday at our school, and it was always celebrated with a coach trip out to the Dales, starting in Wharfdale and working our way towards Malham. Over the following years, I visited Malham many times after taking up rambling and also many school field trips. This is a piece of the Malham area, and there are three elements to this: Malham Cove, Gaudiel Scar, and Malham Tarn. For some reason, I carry around a set of mental images of Malham, which evoke a range of emotions: peace and tranquility, that's Malham Cove; awe and excitement, which is Gaudiel Scar; and stillness and solitude, which is Malham Tarn. This is a postcard of Gaudiel Scar. I can still remember the anticipation I felt the first time I approached Gaudiel Scar when I was a kid. It didn't disappoint. It's sheer wonderment. There's a Turner painting, which I'll show in a minute, which sums up the feelings beautifully. We were very young then and we weren't allowed to go too close, let alone climb up it. But it was fine by me, exciting but very scary as well. And this is the Turner. I think this is in Tate Britain. It's a fantastic piece of work, I think. I did manage to eventually climb Gaudiel Scar when I was in the 5th form on a field trip. even though we weren't supposed to do so. There was too much water coming down, the teacher said. But we kind of ignored him and pretended that we couldn't hear him because of the waterfall coming down. And we just scampered up it. There was a poor student teacher there who was assisting with the field trip, who was promptly ordered to go up and supervise us. We did our best to cause an avalanche on the ski slopes as he came up. Here's a picture of Malham Cove itself. Wonderful. This is from a calendar, of course. The mental picture of Malham Cove is always swathed in brilliant sunshine. Not typical of the Dales weather, of course. It's a coastal feature, now stranded in the middle of the country. Hard to get your head round when you're young. Still, to get to the top of the cove and take a panoramic view of the Dales is certainly something spectacular. I do distinctly remember taking some photographs when I was a kid, but I can't find them. They've long since gone. Particularly the top, which is a geological feature in itself, a unique one really, a limestone pavement, which is absolutely something fantastic. As I said, I haven't any photographs, so I googled this image from Malham Tarn, and yeah, it doesn't seem to. It's not what my mind's eye tells me, if you see what I mean. My first visit there was on a dull grey afternoon, furthest point on a field trip. A very dark pool of water, as I recall, almost black. Also, the desolate moorland around it made it feel tremendously remote. It felt as if we'd landed on the moon. A lake that shouldn't be there, a lake that serves no purpose. For some strange reason, it brought back an Arthurian legend came to mind. Kept thinking about a hand coming up brandishing Excalibur. Sometimes I'm tempted to think that Malham is a place which exists solely in my mind, even though it's a real place where thousands of people flock to each year. I've often thought of going back there and taking a few photographs. Still, that might disturb the mental images I already have. So better to preserve my memories, perhaps.
Okay, great. Is that the reason why you haven't gone back in 40 years?
Yeah.
Wow, that's sad.
Yeah, I know it is, but it's such a beautiful spot. But it does get thronged with tourists, I'm told, especially in the summer months. Yeah. And I think it might in fact spoil it for me in some ways. But, as I say, it's one of those images that you escape to. You know, it settles your mind, if you like, if you see what I mean. And that's what I cherish, I suppose, more than anything else, that I can escape mentally with an image of beauty and tranquility, really.
David, do you think that image gets strengthened over time then? Because that's a long time for an image to revisit. So do you think actually, have you kind of over time embellished that picture in your head? You know, kind of what has it become, you know, bigger, better? And is that why you're afraid to go back to as well? To kind of.
I would say it's iconic in that sense. It's become a kind of mystical, almost.
Are you scared you'd be disappointed, David?
Possibly, yes. Possibly that's true.
Were you very happy at that age?
I think so. Yes, definitely, yes.
Before you had any big responsibilities, or said you were talking when you were quite young, still, weren't you?
Yes, I mean, what I'm saying is that you see everything with a fresh eye. But, you know, Gaudiel Scar really did look like that. If I go back now, I'd probably think, well, it's rather puny and there's not much of a waterfall there. Might not even have any water coming down it. But when I was young, it seemed awesome, absolutely awesome. Yeah. Same with the Cove. The Cove was brilliantly sunny days, wonderful days where you just sort of like lolled around and enjoyed life.
I'm interested to know if anybody else in the group uses that kind of mental imagery to help them get through lockdown.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes perfect sense to me, David. I love it. I love that idea. You can, you know, associate such significance with a place, but never go in there. I think that's brilliant. I love it. Love everything about it, really. You know, we always feel like we have to go somewhere. I think I know a bit about America, a bit about Americana, a bit about American history. I know a little bit about that. And I would like to go, actually, but I don't feel I need to go. I don't need to go. You know, I think what you're saying is really interesting take on what we're all talking about. It's a place in your mind, really, collaged together with bits of ephemera and bits and pieces of, you know, it just feels to me a really interesting thing. It's a bit like the way we imagine living on Mars or living on, you know, it's different. You know, we have to kind of use our minds to visit a place rather than catching a train or a bus or aeroplane. I really like that idea.
But you go a lot of places, David. That's what's so fascinating to me. You go out of your way to catch trains and buses. You've come and stayed with us in Hull and you've gone off. You're always going off places. I find this quite fascinating that you've got this one place that is just
well, it's a talisman, and that's how I use it, I guess. But I mean, there are other places that have significance to me, as everybody else has. But that just immediately cropped to mind. It was odd in a way, because to get the map out and find Malham on it, it was a map I used when I was well, a teenager.
You love maps, Dave.
Yeah, and I do love the map, and I had to find it and look at the map and say, well, yeah, this just reminds me of being on a hike or something, you know, all those years ago.
I love that area. I went to stay at Langcliffe, and I remember getting the train to Settle and being so surprised because it was really easy to get to Settle. And then Langcliffe was just above it, and there's a river, a stream that runs past through Langcliffe, and as you walk over the stream to the other side of it, this was like 10 years ago, there were still buildings there that were old farm buildings with these huge old dry stone walls that went up so high that you couldn't climb over them, that they'd drive the cattle down them, and they were just untouched and just looked just the same as they would have done like 100 years ago. It is a special area. It is still lovely.
Well, I've actually been to Malham Cove. I've walked across Malham Cove. Very dangerous thing to do, but we've gone from one side to the other. Like a tightrope pressed to the wall, trying to walk across. It's difficult to do, you know, dangerous to do. And but that was part of the appeal when we were kids, like 6, 17, 18. We used to go to the Dales. But I think I've not really thought about that until you've just done your talk. And the power in your memory is much more powerful than in mine. Although I've been stood on it, pressed up against it, shitting myself. In a way, your memory is much more potent and much more powerful than mine. And that shows the power of the mind, really. You know, it's not always about being there. You know, it's not always about like experiential first-hand experience. It's not always about that. And I really like that. You know, the way you presented and we explained it.
Right.
You know, because I think that's the power of the mind and power of the imagination. And I don't think you should go. I don't think you should go. As brilliant as it is.
Well, it's making me think. About it. It's making me think that I've got the exact opposite syndrome. Whereas if I don't, I've been going to Pembrokeshire since I was 2 years old, or a baby actually.
Isn't the point?
I feel as though if I don't go every year, somehow, I even managed to go last year, it will disappear. It won't be there anymore. So I have to go there because it's my existence. And this relates to your things, Lisa, that when I see them, I always think they're about proving you exist in a way, because it's like camouflage. Like you're camouflaged, but you're there.
That's what's, Julia, that's what's so confident about David's explanation of it. He doesn't need that, you know, underpinning. He's confident in a way. He just likes it as it is, you know, in the mind. So I'm a bit like you. I like, you know, to
make sure somewhere's still
not always, you know, but I also really appreciate what David's doing. I think it's great.
Was it Jill that said at the beginning of doing these, was it you, Jill, where you said you took a photograph of yourself and shared it on social media and you were almost just saying, I'm here, I exist? And like what somebody was saying about them sharing photographs of themselves in front of the marina or wherever during lockdown.
I said it.
Julia.
I said it because when my children were small, before the advent of the kind of photography and phones we have, I used to take pictures, and I was the one who took them mostly, of my children. And every now and again, I would hand Roger the camera and say, take a picture of me to prove I was here.
Find that as a mum that you end up taking the photos and you don't always get in the photos.
No. And so now it's become a standard sort of joke that I'll say, take a photo to prove I was here. Because I don't know about anybody else, but I feel quite insecure about that at the moment.
That's what David's doing. He's not doing what we'd all expect to do. He's doing exactly the opposite. It's a conceptual thing. It's conceptual in conceptual place. He doesn't feel need to go there, and that's what's so good about it. The fact that he's doing exactly the opposite to what we'd all think we should be doing. He's doing exactly the opposite. It's like a work of art in itself, really. That.
I was going to just say that, you know, often nowadays, the only way we can validate a visit is to take a photograph of it, or else it doesn't mean anything to us. You know, it hasn't. You know, it's meaning the photograph.
I read a really good article about selfies, about how you know, generation below me and below, because I'm old now. That's where the rise of the selfie is so philosophically important for younger people, because their lives are so restrained, not just because of pandemic, but austerity and the way that, you know, they don't have the same naturally upwardly curve that we had. We were in that golden era, weren't we, people of my age? And so the sense of validating themselves all the time, every day. This is who I am. It's really, you know, really important to say that I do exist and I will not be forgotten. And this generation must be, you know, we must validate ourselves. I thought that was.
My son said the opposite there, Ted.
Did he? Did he?
We saw a sunset the other day, and as he came up to the sunset, he said, "What did you say when there was that sunset?" And he said, "You didn't want to take a photograph because you wanted to just enjoy the moment. You didn't want to take a photograph." He's 14, and I thought, oh, that's quite interesting.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, he's the son of an artist, though, Sarah. He's the son
the exact antithesis. Sorry,
David, Sarah. I'm a bit like you with artworks. I can have artworks that I've never seen, but only maybe read about or heard about. And then they're kind of they loom large in my imagination, and I talk about them a lot. They're part of what I think about, and yet I've never seen them. And yet when I was a teacher, I'd always say how important it was to actually direct artwork. One of the things that I talk about the most, I've never seen. Like, I've never seen House, and I'm always bloody on about that. But I think I'm similar to you, Dave. They've taken up a place in my imagination, and then I suppose they're mine now. You know,
the exact antithesis of this concept is really with the Mona Lisa. People queue up round the block to spend 5 seconds in front of the Mona Lisa. When they get towards it, everybody pulls out a phone and takes a picture of it. Yeah. Nobody really looks at it. Nobody's looking at the Mona Lisa. They're taking a picture to prove they were there and moving on. You know, and they just
not
look
to
back at the
mention there's a Veronese behind
that's
you.
That's the reality of the modern world. People aren't experiencing things in the real. They experience it by, you know, through other mediums. So they just don't. They get to that point of going to France, going to the Louvre, going to see the Mona Lisa. They get there, they don't even look at it. That's what's mad about it. And that's exactly what David's doing. You don't need to justify it.
I've got a lot of sympathy with these kids and their photograph, because I love documenting everything and anything from my children to drives Roger mad, really. And during this lockdown thing, it's become even more of an issue, because I used to just put mostly my artwork on Facebook, and you know, it was a way of publicizing what I was doing. But lately I found I've been out today, I've been somewhere. And actually we've also been to bits of Hull in the close vicinity that we'd not really bothered with before, and have been quite surprised to find ourselves, oh, we've never been here before. This is quite little nooks and crannies everywhere that you used to just, I mean, in fact, when you were talking about, Jill, about the what's it, the fish trail.
Oh, we did that at the weekend.
Oh, did you enjoy it?
Inspired by you.
Oh,
well, that's
cool.
good. That's awfully good. But I suddenly thought, I don't think I've done it all. I've done bits of it with my children. And because I get obsessed with one fish or something or whatever, I lose, but you keep going. I think that's
Julia,
probably...
Julia, I'm like you, Julia. I document everything. I document everything. Too much, really. But what I love about this is that David's not doing that. He's doing exactly the opposite. And that's what's so powerful about it.
Oh, I have a lot of admiration for people who are calm and not needing all this, but I'm quite insecure.
Well, exactly that. That's what I'm saying. That's exactly it. That's it.
Yeah, David, is your experience a sensory one? Is your memory one of sensory, or is it visual?
It's both, actually. I mean, I have a mental picture, obviously. I mean, I talked about Malham Tarn, how dark it was there. And yet I couldn't find a photograph that conveyed that in any way, shape or form. So that image is fixed, is a fixed image. But also it brings back emotions,
School trips.
Yeah, school trips.
When you were talking about it, I thought about Cheddar Gorge, because we went on a school trip to Cheddar Gorge. And I don't think I've ever been there again, but and Sinnan's Yacht and all this. And it was totally, I think it was almost the names that have stuck in my memory more than the actual place.
Well, I think somebody said at the beginning, after Dave finished, how many people, have used it, or sort of, I've forgotten who it was, how many people have done this in lockdown. I haven't found I have, because I think I need the sensory thing, which is what you just mentioned. I need the reality of the smells and the difference. It's interesting, isn't it? I've gone into books more. I've found some people haven't been able to read, but I've read more novels in lockdown than I ever have in my life. And the book I was talking about was actually called Piranesi, which, funny enough, Julia just mentioned in the background just now. And it isn't about Piranesi the artist, but it is based on Piranesi's drawings. It's the most amazing book. It's the most wonderful locatory book in terms of description, And that's where I've been. I'm reading this book again, simply to go there, to this place. It's so beautiful. I think I do words possibly more than some other people here, because I'm not an artist as you all are. I'm more of a word-based artist, I suppose. So I found that interesting.
I know you can say that, Caroline, the work you've been doing for Anna Bean's Art Club.
No, I was thinking, it's quite influenced.
Wow. I have to get my confidence up again.
Funny that. I must mention, just the only time I've been to Malham Cove was with Julia and some other students, and we had a travelling theatre trip to Kendal.
Don't tell them anymore.
And on the way back, we stopped at Malham Cove for some refreshments, and I know somehow we got up onto a ledge. I seem to remember it's quite a leisurely little trek. And we sat down on the ledge, got the thermos flask out, and was sitting down enjoying the view. When suddenly, on the edge of the ledge, a hand appeared, and then a second hand, and then a mountaineer sort of climbed in.
We were on the flat.
I thought, yeah, this is
no idea.
2 ways.
I missed that. What was it?
Mountaineer.
Well, we'd on the way back, we'd been to Kent. We stopped in Malham Cove, and I don't remember climbing up. There must be some easy way up, because we sat on a ledge, small little ledge. It was
a picnic.
5 of us, and with the flask out, and suddenly a hand appeared, and then a second hand, and then a head. And this mountaineer just sort of like climbed up amongst us and carried on.
You must have thought, who are these lazy gets sitting up here? I've just come all the way up here.
The past show is something like that, doesn't it? Oh, God, that's funny.
Oh, well, I know, Mike, you were going to say something earlier. Do you still want to say something?
Am I muted yet? No, I'm not. No. So I was just going to say that there's a few things that occur to me listening to, in a way, the last, both David and there's a kind of vibrancy in remembering. You know, the expression that Lisa just gave in terms of this sort of remarkable trip to Romania in a minibus. It's kind of, it's possibly more alive in your mind than something that happened this morning.
Yeah, definitely.
There's also a kind of formality or a discipline involved in the way that David relates to, like, I love Malham as well, but I've been meaning to revisit Malham since I've moved back to Yorkshire. I'm also, I don't want to sully that memory either. I get that to some extent. So, in a sense, we cannot compare our own perceptions and experiences across time and space, but we can join together in sharing the memory of them. You know, who am I to say that Graham or David's memory or version of Malham is the same as mine? Because we can't compare perceptions. The value of art and the cultural products that many of us want to make or enjoy looking at, just sort of pathetic attempts or part of a process of, I don't know, reperforming something.
It's
interesting, Mike. I would say David's impression or kind of memory of Malham Cove is much stronger than mine.
But who are you to say that?
Because I've not thought about it for like 30, 40 years.
Well, it's, in a way, it's immaterial. That's my point. It's.
Well, no, but that memory for me has faded. It's gone, and it wasn't that. You know, it's interesting at the time as a kid.
How do you compare?
And now what David's doing is a conceptual thing. It's conceptual art, really. What he's talking about and the way he's delivered it is brilliant.
To even add another tangent, I've even had dreams that are so vivid that every time I go to a place where the dream was set, I have to tell Dave over and over again. Every time we go there, I'm like, oh, this is the point in the dream where, and I'll tell him, basically it's a film, this dream, and I have to tell him, and he's like, I know, you tell me this every time we go past this place. But yes, and that was a dream, which was also a place.
I think we've really moved on in a way from, you know, kind of talking about place to talking about a shared space in a way, and that shared space doesn't necessarily have to be a real place. Yeah. And I think there's a real kind of journey there, isn't it? Because we've really moved from very real places, you know, like the fish trail and walking and kind of having our feet on the ground, to like a memory. But then we've all kind of tapped into that same memory, and we've kind of shared that space, you know, our memory of Malham Cove. And I find that really quite fascinating. I'm thinking, you know, that could be kind of the next step for us to kind of think about, yeah, kind of what shared spaces, you know, and dreams. And I know dreams can be so real that sometimes I'm not sure whether it's a place I actually visited or it's a place I made up in a dream, isn't it? So there is that real fluidity between reality and imagination, and how we kind of combine those, you know, in like Lisa's piece of work of her kind of memories of the place, and then sitting there and stitching those memories together into a real piece that still now looks really enticing. I loved, actually, Lisa, I loved the way while you were talking how you kind of unrolled that, and I was actually really worried about the paper, and I was like, oh no, I hope it doesn't break, you know. It's quite fragile, no.
Should have white gloves on.
Yeah. Do you know, it actually, when I was sat here looking at it, it actually looks a bit like a toilet paper as well. you know, thinking about the pandemic and the kind of like
ancient as well.
Ancient,
like Chinese, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you know, sometimes it reminds me of when I was a child. I had a thing for taking cardboard boxes and making them into televisions, and then drawing my own pictures on them and winding a handle. And I always used to my mother used to give me wallpaper to do it on, old bits of wallpaper. I was completely obsessed. I was always making these damn things. because somehow I thought I could recreate some kind of program.
Can I say that
oh, sorry.
I don't know David, like I've never met David in real life, and I've barely visited Malham, but for me now those two things are going to be like really closely stitched together. Like if I do go to Malham, I'll think about David, and somehow those two things, so he's almost now a Lisa collage appearing and disappearing.
That's right. That's a really good
Make a
point.
suggestion.
We all feel that we
We'll
know
go
about
to the Eagle pub. Who knows the Eagle?
Yeah.
That's
the thing, you know,
In Malham.
Yeah.
we don't always have to meet in person.
The Eagle is a fantastic pub in Malham.
Great.
Wow.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Let's go for a drink in Malham.
Mention pubs. I can't cope.
Well, we should one day all meet in real and have one of these conversations, and maybe it should be in one of those places that we talk about and create a shared memory for all of
David
us.
won't turn up. David won't turn up, will you? You won't turn up.
We can't go to Malham. David won't come.
I know, we need to go.
That's the beauty of it, that we all feel like we know each other. We never met, but I really empathise with exactly what you've said. And it's that same thing about you with a Cove. You empathise with a Cove, not never been there. Yeah. And it's that kind of thing where you don't always need to go and meet, experience it in person. Yeah. We're doing the same thing now, exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. That's the power of it. That's the power of the imagination, power of the visual, really. You don't always need to touch. It's like a touchstone. We don't need to always touch it to feel like we're there. And that's what you've talked about. It's a powerful thing.
Oh, again, you know, these are getting longer and longer. So much rich content. So again, you know, thank you all so much. And hi, Glynis, thanks for kind of joining us for a bit. And I must admit, I think your screen and the lighting on your screen looks amazing. You look like a painting on our screen. So, you know, and I hope maybe join us again next time, because you just came at the very end, and I hope you got a bit of a taste of what this is all about and how rich the conversation becomes and how it develops over the course of these two meetings. And I think it's wonderful. So we haven't set a theme for next time, but, you know, maybe, you know, just put suggestions in and we'll come up with another theme, and hopefully see you all again next week for another show and tell that probably will last for at least a couple of sessions. I think we have to allow that. So every theme we set will definitely run for two weeks, so that everybody gets a chance to talk and we can all comment and kind of stitch things together. I think this is what we actually end up doing. We kind of start pulling all these different threads together into what hopefully one day will be a really long, you know, papyrus stitched together and exhibited somewhere. So thank you all so much, and enjoy your dinners or your lovely evenings, and see you soon.
Bye.
Brilliant. Well done. Good night, everybody.
That's real good.
Bye.
Bye.
Good job.
Thanks, Marianne.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.